Well, hello, we're in X-Plane 11. We're going to fly the Zibo Boeing 737. We'll do a hot start on a new flight. The airport is VQPR, and we are positioned on runway 15 right here. Confirmed. And we will set it up so that we start with the engines running. So this is a hot start. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to configure the flight management computer so that we will be able to get the callouts for 80 knots, V1, rotate, and then we'll also be able to put the autopilot on once we're steady in our climb. Here we are in the cockpit with runway 15 in front of us, and we're in Paro, Bhutan. Let's take a quick look around at the airport. We see here that looking down the runway there's a hill, so we'll have to turn sharp left, then a right again, then another left and a right, and that's a standard departure. It's always visual at this airport. So getting back into the cockpit, the first order of business will be to set up the payload, the fuel, and the passengers. So coming to the tab here, we click on Fuel, Weight, and Balance. So in order to set the payload, I'll go here and click on Payload here in the top left corner. I want the total load of the fuel plus the passengers to be 53,000 pounds and no more, because I found 53,000 is the maximum I can take off on this short runway at Paro. And also it's at a reasonably high altitude of 7,000 plus feet. So in order to do that, I'm going to set up a calculator here to set 53,000 and subtract 18144 for the fuel. That gives me 34856 for the payload. So I come in here and I click on the payload. Having done that, I go to the payload total here, it says 0. I click on that and I enter 34856. And that's a return there. Having done that, I go back and click on payload again. And I see the payload is ramping up, and when it gets to 34856, I'll be ready. Alright, so we have a full payload here. The next thing I'm going to do is go on to the next page here, which is this arrow here on the right. I see I have a full load of passengers and some cargo. And now I want to check that I'm inside the flight envelope. So I see here that the gross weight is right above the maximum landing weight, which is all right because we'll be burning off fuel and reducing our weight once we're away. And the gross weight is well below the maximum takeoff weight, so we're all set there. Now, having done that, let's go to the flight management computer, the FMC, which is right here. The first thing I do is there's an error message here, so I'll use this clear button at the bottom right corner to clear that error message off. And then I go to this init ref button at the top left corner. Having done that, I need to click on the gross weight, the top right button on the right over here, and it fills it in automatically. That done, I need to enter the reserve fuel, which I'll use 1.5, which is 1,500 pounds of reserve fuel. That'll go in the fourth button from the top here. That's done. And for cost index, I enter 1, 2. You can see 12 entered there. And that'll go in this button there for the cost index. And there it is. It's filled in 12. My cruising altitude today will be 18,000 feet. So I'll enter 18,000. And that goes in that button there. And I'm going to calculate the top of climb temperature as follows. I'll look on the dash here. And I see that the outside air temperature here is 0. 18,000 feet is going to be about 10,000 feet above where we are. So at 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet, that's 20 degrees less than 0. So I'm going to enter minus 20. So the minus button is right here. 2, 0. I have minus 20 ready there. And I'm going to enter it on this button here, right next to the top of climb, that's T/C OAT, outside air temperature. Now that done, I see the green light is on above the exec, so I'm going to click on this exec button right here and move on to the next page which says N1 limit. That's the lower right button. I'll accept the information on this takeoff page, on the N1 limit page as it is, and move on to the takeoff page, which is the next page, by clicking on this lower right arrow. Now that done, I have to enter the flaps. The flap setting for the short runway will be 1, 5. I have 15 entered, and I'm going to enter it right next on that top left button here, 15. And this is a good time to go ahead and set the flaps so that there's no misunderstanding later on. So we'll come to the throttle quadrant here. We see the flap button here. It's currently set off, so we'll bring it down all the way to 15. Alright. Now if we go outside, we can see the leading edge slats are deploying right there. Here they go. And once that's done, the flaps in the back of the wing are going to deploy. You can see them deploying here and here. Alright, we can go back inside and check this flap indicator here, and it does say 15, so we're all set. Now with the flap set, we need to go back down to the flight management computer and use this third button from the top to try and set the center of gravity. That didn't work for some reason, but we don't exactly need that in order for the autopilot and the callouts to work, as you'll see. Next thing we do is there are these three buttons here right next to the V1, VR, and V2, and we'll set them in turn. The top right, the second button there, and the third button. And we see these speeds are filled in. Having done that, the next order of business for us will be to set the elevator trim correctly. Now I know from flying this aircraft that when the V2 is 142, we need about 4.5 degrees of elevator trim. So that's what I'm going to do here. We've zeroed in on the elevator trim button, and we can see that it's currently set to right about 5. We're going to set it to 4.5, so I'm going to use the cursor to spin the wheel. Okay, so that's set to about 4.5, which is fine for me. Now we're going to go to the MCP panel here, and we're going to set some of the things that we need to set. Right below that first, we're going to set the auto brake right here to the RTO setting, which is the lower left for rejected takeoff. Having done that, we're going to set the speed here to V2 plus 15. I see V2 is 142 right there, so I'll add 15 to that. It's 157. And that's what I would normally set it at for a takeoff. But in this case, we're going to be hand flying it after the takeoff all the way around the departure, and at the time we engage the autopilot, the speed that we'll need is 250 at a minimum. So that's what I'll set it at. So it's not accepting that with that much flaps on right now. So I'll leave it at the maximum that it can go, which is about 200. For the heading, I'm going to set it to the runway heading, which I see here is 151. And the altitude has to be set to 18,000, which is our cruise altitude. So at this point, we also have to remember to turn the flight director on the left side on first, and the green light comes on showing it's the master. Then we go to the right-hand side flight director on switch, turn that on, and then we come to the autopilot arm switch and turn that on. And now we're pretty much set for the autopilot to engage if we set the other things up properly. Now let's go to the overhead panel. We see here that the pressurization altitude is set to 13. We need to increase that to 18,000, which is our cruise altitude. And we're going to come back to this airport, so we'll set the landing altitude to 7350, which we can see from the display here is the altitude at which the airport is at. Okay, so all that having been done, we need to go to the lights section of the overhead panel. Let me just close in on that, which is the last row here. We see the beacon, the anti-collision has to be on, so it is. The position light has to be strobe and steady, which is 2 clicks, we'll take it to the top. The engine starters have to be at continuous, CONT. The APU is off, and all the landing lights need to come on now. That done, we'll go back and take another look at the display and make sure there are no lights on that are of concern. These are green lights for the window heat, that's fine. These lights here are showing the altitude, which is also fine. There's a couple of blue lights for cowling flaps open. That should be all right. And now we're ready, I believe, to take off. Now once we take off, I'm going to shift to the Shift plus W view, which is right here. I'll get a circle showing me where the plane is currently headed. This solid line here is the horizon, and very important here will be the airspeed. Okay, and this will be the altitude and the rate of climb. So let's get back in the cockpit here and check that the parking brake is on. So now we're ready for takeoff. So what we'll do is we'll increase the throttle as much as we can with the parking brake on. So let's ramp it up gently. That's the warning. I want to back it off a bit and let the engine spool up, and then I'm going to hit the simulated TOGA button, TOGA, takeoff go around, which is the button labeled mic here. But before I do that, immediately before I do that, I'll hit V to release the parking brake. So here we go. Here's the parking brake. It's off. TOGA is on. Engine is ramping up automatically to M1, and here we go. Watch the speed there. I'll get a call out at 80, then V1 and rotate. A little bit off center there. Okay. Gears up. Don't bring the nose too high because we have to accelerate. Now we turn we turn left to avoid the hill. And do not bank more than 30 degrees. And that's the bank angle right there. Lower the nose to accelerate. I just took out one notch of flap there because we've reached about 180. I took out another notch of flap, so we're at 5 degrees now. At 190, I'm bringing it down to 1 degree of flap, and I'm going to pull the nose up now to climb just above 190. The horizon line tells me I'm going to clear that ridge there if I stay right here. At around 215, I'm going to take out the last bit of flap, so we're clean now. And we need to start turning right as soon as we can here. Need to lower the nose a bit. It's a high bank angle. Now it's important to line up with that valley right underneath. Now we level off. Hold the speed at 240, and now before we can engage the autopilot, I need to come in here and trim away all the pressure on the yoke. The yoke has to be completely neutral or the autopilot will not engage. That done, I increase the speed to 250 now. I line up the heading, the magenta line which you can see right here on the control, on the display, to wherever we're going. And at this point I can click heading select, and I come over here and click on command, and you can see the autopilot's engaged without complaint and the level change light has come on. So now the autopilot is going to climb the airplane very smoothly to 18,000 feet. And let me just turn off the air brake there. Lower the landing gear lever into the neutral position. And I see a fuel light there. That's because there's no more fuel left in the center tank. So I'll turn the pumps off. And there we go. Let's take a closer look at the display. It's climbing through 16,400 feet. It's going to get to 18,000 and level off. So let's wait for that. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And thank you for watching.
As we go.